All right, moving on to the third place team in this Central Division, and that's the Minnesota Wild. 54 points in 45 games. They have lost 2 in a row and have kind of tailed off a little bit as of late. They lost to the Florida Panthers over the weekend, who are trying to survive in the Eastern Conference playoff race. But let's talk about the Minnesota Wild, Bill Guerin's squad. Case, your grade for the Wild.
I've given Minnesota a B here, kind of where we expected them to be, either here or one position lower in the standings. And there's some positives and some negatives to take away from this team. The positives being their defense. They're doing fairly well at just limiting scoring chances in general, like high danger, medium, low, everything, shots, I guess. They play very well in their own zone, and they're the second best in goals against, and that's despite being, I think they are 10th in save percentage in this league. So that speaks to their defense and the scoring chances they're allowed and the rebounds they're allowing, and they're second lowest in high danger shots against. So this team is very good defensively, but the negatives I have is a real lack of scoring depth compared to even Winnipeg, where Kaprizov is the man here, and there's a few other guys, Boldy and maybe Eriksson Ek, but it falls off quick when it comes to scoring goals. They're not getting that depth scoring they had last year, and it's definitely showing. And then the other negative is that this team, their bread and butter, and if I quizzed 100 people, they would say physicality, right? Well, they're not as physical as someone would think. They're 27th in the league in hits. I just thought I had to bring that up because this team has always been the big, scary Minnesota Wild. Well, they're playing defense without hitting somehow, so I guess it's a structure thing. So yeah, I have them at a B here.
I mean, that is surprising because you expect physical teams to rack up a lot of hits, but it could also indicate that they just have the puck more, and that's fine too. But, a big team, you would expect some hits, so that is still surprising to hear that they're 27th in the league. But, Case, I have to say, did you read my notes before, we did this episode? Because that's 2 now in a row where we have the same grade. I also have a B for the Minnesota Wild because, for a lot of the same reasons that you mentioned, I think this is kind of exactly where we thought they would be at this point in the season. They're being carried offensively by Kaprizov, Zuccarello to an extent, Joel Eriksson Ek to an extent, and Matthew Boldy has fit in nicely there offensively. But, they've replaced Kevin Fiala sort of with Matthew Boldy. I think that would be the closest trade-off in terms of offensive production, but it's still not quite enough. I think they still need to do more, whether it's at the deadline or in the offseason, to improve their depth scoring, just to put some more goals in the net, because that's clearly one of their weaknesses right now. When it comes to goaltending, they've gotten pretty above average goaltending from Philip Gustafsson this season, and about average from Marc-Andre Fleury, who also took that brief leave just a week or so ago. And I don't know exactly what the situation is there now, but it seems like they're going to be going to both of them. But goaltending hasn't been an issue this season so far. Like we said, it's kind of been the scoring. They're 22nd in goals for right now among all the NHL teams, and they're top 10 in terms of goals against. So they're still getting good defense, like you mentioned, Case, but they're just not able to score. And they're not getting any help either on the special teams. Both of their special teams are pretty average. So my question that I wanted to ask you guys about this team is sort of like, what do you think they do at the deadline to add offense, if that's what we think they need? And does it involve moving Matt Dumba, who they've been sitting over the last couple games or so?
Yeah, well, we've heard rumors of Matt Dumba to Edmonton, but what piece is Edmonton going to send Minnesota's way for scoring? Like, Edmonton needs scoring themselves. They have 3 guys. But I don't know. It's crazy. I think maybe there's rumors of maybe looking within the division and going for a Tarasenko route, but they got to do something about scoring, because last year, you had Foligno coming off a career year, same as Hartman. You were getting production from guys like Freddie Gaudreau.
Yeah.
So all of those guys have kind of come back to the mean a little bit, and yeah, it's scoring. That's what they have to do at the deadline.
I do think that Guerin takes a big swing at the deadline. I would not be surprised if they're in on Bo Horvat. I think that a player like that would make a ton of sense. They do have some assets. They have some picks. They have some prospects. And I think he's going to do everything he can to try and make this team better, because as we know, next year it gets even worse with their cap situation. They're in cap jail next year, so it's not going to get any easier. So this is kind of a year to go for it if you're the Minnesota Wild, and we know that Guerin is not afraid to make big moves. And going back to the Dumba thing, like you brought up, Chad, he's been very clear that he's not going to trade Matt Dumba unless it makes his team better. So, case like you mentioned, the Oilers, it's not like we're going to see a Dumba for Puljujarvi kind of thing or whatever. So we'll see what happens there. But watching them at the deadline, it's going to be interesting to see what they do.
They could be the sneaky team who lands, a Johnny Gaudreau of last year or something. They could land the Bo Horvat, and it wouldn't surprise me. They would be the team
or Timo Meier.
Right. They could be the team that comes in from left field and just puts the right deal together, includes a guy like Matt Dumba and just makes it happen. I could see it.
Yep. For sure. And all right, for my grade for the Minnesota Wild, I'm also giving them a B. And no, I'm not listening to you two chumps and then editing my grades. I'm not doing any of that, I promise. But I'm also giving them a B. So we've got a clean sweep when it comes to our grades for the Minnesota Wild. In my opinion, I think that, yes, they need to add a scorer, very underrated blue line. But I wouldn't mind if they added another goaltender, just to give them some extra insurance. I think that they had a rough start to the season, and then they've been able to climb their way out of it. Now it's things have kind of cooled off a little bit for them. We know that Marc-Andre Fleury is not as consistent as he once was, and Philip Gustafsson is still a young kid learning the waters of the NHL. So if they could pick up an insurance option in net, I think that would be a smart move as well. And a guy in mind, for example, is a former Wild in Alex Stalock, who has actually played pretty well and has a good save percentage with the Chicago Blackhawks. So just something like that while adding some scoring depth for this team. By the way, I think that's a great contract as well for Matt Boldy, and I think that could turn out to be a bargain for this team in the long run. So, yeah, giving the Wild a B.
I think the only reason for them to add a goalie would be if we get an update on the Marc-Andre Fleury situation, or if there's more to that story than we know already. I don't think they need the depth in goal at all. I think they have two capable goalies, and if you look at the surface level numbers and the advanced numbers, they've both been okay. Like I mentioned, Fleury's been about average with his ups and downs, which is fine because he's not going to be your starter come playoff time. It's going to be Philip Gustafsson, who's put together quite a nice season, and I think that's the guy that you have to rely on. So I disagree. I don't think they need a goalie unless there's more to the Fleury story, or if it costs them, the cheap, maybe like a third or a fourth round pick just for some insurance.
Well, fair point, and they're pretty well set up for the future with Jesper Wallstedt as a goalie in their system. So there we go.